You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Call, and I'm joined right now by Brad Hunt, and today's guest is Gregg Ritz. And we met Gregg. I met Gregg for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you did
Same
too.
Here, yeah, I've watched Gregg years and years, but it's the first time ever meeting him.
Great interview, great discussion. You're going to want to tune in. You don't want to miss this one. I thoroughly enjoyed Gregg's company. Got to talk to him a lot about archery. That was primarily, we kind of just went around and around on archery topics. We split this into two parts because it was over 2 hours long, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
And it just seemed like there were different topics covered in one and some topics covered in another. But the long and short of it is we were at the Total Archery Challenge in Park City.
Yep. Showed
up there, started shooting bows. First time I saw Gregg pull up and shoot, and I was like, oh, this guy's been here before. He knows what he's doing. And he cleaned up the course. It was great to hang out with him. It was obvious that he's just a hardcore hunter.
Yeah.
So I'm like, who is this guy? Because I haven't done a lot of hunting TV, where Brad grew up with some of that. So he's been watching Hunt Masters TV forever. And so it turns out Gregg, a lot of you guys are going to know, and you're going to laugh at me for this, but Gregg's a legend.
He's been doing it a long time, 26 years in the hunting TV business. Yeah.
So he's a wealth of knowledge. He's certainly honed his archery prowess and how to kill in the clinch, in the moment, in the heat of the moment. So it's a great episode. Let us know what you think. Give Gregg a follow if you enjoyed it. I really liked it.
And he just, there's those guys that what you see on TV, you may not get in person. Gregg's not that guy.
Yeah.
Gregg's very entertaining, but he speaks to you like you've known each other for a long time.
You should walk away from this podcast with little nuggets of knowledge on shooting and being ready to kill with your bow. Kind of talks about his archery journey and progression, as did I. But it's a great conversation. So before we jump in, I want to ask you, if you like the show, support us by shopping over at Stealthy Nutrition, Stealthy Hunter. All the supplements that Ryan has, they're excellent. Check those out. Use the code GRITTY over at Mountain Ops. Get yourself a little pick-me-up, a little ignite. They have some new flavors over there. And use the code GRITTY over at Sheep Feet Orthotics. It's almost time, and if you get your imprints done now for your feet, you can have them before the season starts.
Now's the time for your rifle hunts coming up in October. September you're pushing it.
Yeah, you might still early in August. I mean, I think you might pull it off. And then goat knives. Our friend Travis Nowotny. Everybody needs a couple skinning knives. I like the one that hangs around her neck and is in a sheath, as well as a disposable blade, scalpel knife.
Yep.
They're all great. Check them out. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and today my guest is Gregg Ritz, Hunt Masters. And Gregg and I are at the Total Archery Challenge. We got to shoot today. We went around the course and had a blast.
We did. A lot of good targets. Great setup this year.
This was our first time meeting each other, so the audience is going to get to meet you right now, together. I do like to do this with people like me for the first time, and I take a liking to them. I like to sit down, throw the headsets on them, and then, my audience gets to meet you kind of the same way I do. Right. This is
all
pretty
organic,
fresh. Yeah. And when we hit the mountain today, we were with the Leupold crew and some Mountain Ops. We had Rihanna there, and it was great. It was great to connect with everybody. It's been a while since I've been to a Total Archery Challenge event. And she told me that you were going to be there. And so I always I don't know what someone's really going to be like until you meet them,
Always.
And then usually too, I told you this before too, the whitetail guys, I'm always like, I don't know. They kind of go into this bucket, But then you and I got to hang out. And I've been out hunting east just a couple of times on some great opportunities to hunt some nice whitetails out there, and it was really fun. But as we connected, you've hunted all over, and you've hunted out west. And after I saw you shoot, I was like, this guy isn't. He's not just a farm guy, whitetail hunter. Like Ryan calls them ag rats, whitetails. Has a disdain for them. My whole audience knows that. There's always these debates on, do whitetail deserve being talked about or not? And I'm always pro whitetail. He's always anti. But you've been all over the place. And then archery. I think a lot of guys that get to hunt whitetails a lot, they get to kill a lot. Because you guys get tags, your state lines are an hour away. You get to go to all these different places, and you have the opportunity to kill more than 5 does sometimes in some spots. You get killing experience with a bow in close range. You get comfortable with that. I kind of envied it. For years I get one tag. Right. I might get one successful stock. I get one kill opportunity, and then that's it. I got to wait another year. That's not enough experience.
Right.
But you guys have a little bit different. And anyway, today I got to watch you shoot. And tell me about that. Before we get into more of your history, like, where did you learn to shoot?
So self-taught, believe it or not, 10 years old.
Where are all the bad habits? Where's all the...
I hang out with good people, right? I watch good people. I think a lot of the people who listen to you and watch your YouTube series, they begin to understand we are super blessed. We run an elite crowd.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is when I visit with you and we start talking about your experiences, and then you multiply that out by the people we know, there's like 100 lifetime experiences that we can absorb and listen and watch that a lot of the average guy doesn't. So 10 years old, I mean, I went through the Boy Scouts, loved the outdoors, loved to shoot a bow. And at 10 years old, we kind of moved, from in town out into the country. And, you got to remember, back when I was 10 years old,
because you're
the Wayback Machine. I'm 50 now.
Yep.
So
I'm right on your heels, a couple years away.
Right. I mean, VCRs were just coming out, right? And you ran them with a cord that connected the remote control. So, So I spent every waking minute in the outdoors because we live, fortunately, right next to a reservoir that was open to the public, but it was bow hunting only.
Mm.
And my next door neighbor, who was a former Marine, was a big hunter. Big hunter. Gun, bow, muzzleloader, handgun, didn't matter. I mean, any waking minute he was hunting and fishing. And so I kind of got introduced there. And then I love equipment.
Yeah.
So back then you're reading the magazines and you're studying it. And I was like, if I do something, I want to be the best at it.
Mm. Yeah, I'm picking apart like the way you're doing your execution, the way you're shooting. And, you're right. I say to my audience all the time, you become like the 5 people you hang out with the most.
Oh, that's a great line, for sure.
And I have been able to, because I spent a lot of years doing a lot of other things. Hunting has always been my life since I was a little kid, but it hasn't been my whole focus.
Mm-hmm.
And as I started Gritty and I started doing the podcast, it became much, much more. My days in the field went from, the standard 3 weeks of vacation, 1 for family, 2 for elk, and deer, to 100 days a year in the field, and then 150 days a year in the field. And that, you learn a lot when you put that many hours into it. And now I can come to it with a level of experience that I didn't have 8 years ago, 7 years ago when I started. And a lot of the people who follow the show are they've seen the progression, and they compliment, they appreciate watching me come up and learn to be a better hunter and more skilled. But I have to give credit to all those people who taught me. And it's not just on the hunting side. There's guys that I learned how to backpack from.
Mm-hmm.
There's guys I learned woodcraft from. There's guys I learned navigation from in the mountains. Guys I learned how to shoot from, shoot a bow, shoot a gun. And how to film and how to tell a story, how to edit, like all those things. I got to hang out with some of the best of the best.
Right.
And I'm still in the shadow of some of the best all the time, which always pushes me
right
to I'm not hunting with a whole bunch of people where I'm the most experienced. I'm hunting with guys that really I have a lot I'll probably never catch up to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important. Like, if you want to be better, you got to hunt with people and get with people.
It's really a life lesson, and I try to do this or teach this lesson to my kids. I have 3 girls, 20,
Wow.
18, and almost 16. I live in the estrogen ocean. You know?
We have a very I have 3 girls.
Oh, you do? See, we're learning together.
And we're just a few years apart, and so are our kids. Mine's 18, 16, and 12.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It is. But what I try to teach them is you need to understand how to learn. And I know that sounds really strange, but a lot of people, especially kids today, they don't know how to learn. Now, I was fortunate by having a lot of great mentors, but I also spent 2 years at the Olympic Training Center for the U.S. shooting team. And now this was on the shotgun side, not archery. But what I came out of there was understanding how to break a discipline down, how to learn fundamentals. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether it's CrossFit for working out. Doesn't matter if it's business, right, on the accounting side or marketing or what have you. There's fundamentals, but understanding how to learn makes you better. Orienteering, perfect example. There's a process to it all, and you've mastered that in a lot of different areas.
How many siblings do you have?
1 younger brother.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a master carpenter. He likes to hunt and fish a little bit. I mean, he doesn't make it his career.
Yeah.
But you want to talk about somebody who's meticulous.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if he builds something, I mean, you put a laser across all the screws, and every one of them is perfect.
So how did you get into hunting? What's your history?
My next door neighbor got me into hunting. Like I said, he was a former Marine. Now, my parents were always in the outdoors. My dad and I fished since I was this big.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I any chance I had, I got outdoors. But I loved bow hunting. So I really started off as an archer and then learned how to hunt at the same time.
Okay.
But I would go in the backyard and shoot until my arm fell off.
So when did you, like, what were some of the, maybe pick two of the most pivotal moments in your archery journey where you're like, where you had this whole paradigm shift or an aha moment where you're like, oh, this is what I'm doing wrong with archery hunting.
Yep.
Like, yeah.
I don't know if I would say wrong. I would certainly say, so here's a couple wake-up moments, right? Because, I mean, when I grew up, I mean, I shot a lot. I went to all the consumer events that I could. My first big game hunt that I paid for, first guided hunt that I paid for, was I grew up in Maryland, so I hunted whitetails. And
not a lot of public land.
All public land when I grew up.
Oh, really?
Yep, all public land. I had a 3,500-acre reservoir across the street, but then I would go to George Washington National Forest, which is 1 million acres of public hunting. And I would spend 10 days backpacking.
How crowded was that? Was anybody back there trying to do it?
Never saw a person.
And then the hunting public came along and screwed that all up.
Right now, everybody's out there with the tree saddle. Right? But when I just got out of college, I went on a Saskatchewan bear hunt.
Yeah.
And so I went up there with some friends. And
this one cost some money.
Adventure. Right. First time I spent my heart, like I saved up and like I wanted to do a bear hunt, and I had some friends that wanted to go. And the preparation, like I had to force myself, what arrows, what broadheads, how far, like understand the anatomy of a bear. Like it forced me to learn at hyper speed on archery because I can't remember what the hunt cost. Maybe it's $2,000 back then. It's really kind of immaterial.
It doesn't matter when you're in college and it's
correct. It was every penny I had, and every emotion was focused on that. And it was an adventure hunt because we would take these little Argos into the backwoods, or we would be on a lake in a boat, and I was just, the world was, first time I went out of the country to hunt. Yeah. So I'd say that was a pivotal moment, that bow hunter for life. Like I walked out of there, that was it. And I love to gun hunt and muzzleloader hunt and handgun hunt. I love to do it all. But that just solidified, that moment. And then I would say, not in any particular order, when I got to truly hang out with really good archers, Lee Lukoski, Levi Morgan, even some of the greats like Forrest Carter, who runs Carter Releases, right?
Yeah.
Who I can tell you absolutely broke down the fundamentals of anchoring and release to me.
Yeah.
Like meeting those individuals and understanding what I thought was a high bar was a step stool. Like that bar was so high for those people.
Right.
These are they're the best of the best.
That's what happened to me with filmmaking. I ran into some people that just broke it wide open for me, opened my eyes to some things. But same with archery. I have my list, of people I got to shoot with, rub shoulders with, and learn from Joel Turner and Levi Morgan, Snyder. Like I got to spend a lot of time with some guys that can shoot bows, and that changed my life because I was pretty bad when I first came into the game. Even though I'd been self-taught and had practiced a lot, I just did it all wrong.
Right,
did it all wrong, and it was a journey. And I feel so empowered today because I can step up behind any cone on this course.
Right, 82 yards, you dropped the 10 ring and didn't even think twice about turning that dial to 82 yards.
And it's like that when I step up, especially the only time I'm really like, this may not end well is when we got a windy day.
Right.
That's kind of it right now. And I feel like otherwise I just go through the process and it goes where it's supposed to go. I'm not, doing like quarter-sized groups, but I'm in the kill zone at all these 3Ds.
Well, you said something on the course today, and I want to have everyone, benefit from a little piece of knowledge that you gave me on the course if you had never thought about this. So obviously every target, right, we were shooting with 8 people originally, right? Pull your binoculars. Oh, where's the 10 ring? Where's the 12 ring, right? And we go up and you say, did I kill it?
Yeah.
Did I kill it? And I asked you, I said, well, were you scoring it? And you said, no, I'm getting ready for hunting season.
Yeah.
And if I go just for score based, because these targets were angled, they were tipped, there were brush in front of it. And then we got into a lengthy conversation on people who shoot for score. They don't develop the muscle memory and the sight memory and the reflexes on where to put the pin during hunting season. Yeah,
I have some buddies who are in leagues, and it's great. I mean, you get to shoot under pressure. You're with buddies, but they're it's all about the score and where those 10 rings and they're aiming for those dots on those targets. And I brought up about a month and a half ago. I'm noticing that they're terrible shot placements where these 10 rings are based on where you're shooting from if you wanted to actually kill an animal. And I had brought up to the guys, I usually, by this time of the year, I'm not shooting for points. I'm shooting for kills because I really want to understand where, at each angle, where the exit, I aim for the exit.
Everyone should.
And I learned that when I started hunting out of tree stands for blacktails in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, where I grew up, because I shot a couple bucks and I'm like, I didn't kill them. Well, I aim for the 10 ring.
Right.
They're steep angled shot. The entrance, I aimed at an entrance behind in a crease, but I didn't really picture in my mind the geometry involved, and I ended up making some bad shots on some beautiful deer that I slaved away to try to kill and stayed in the stand for 12 days, and it was heartbreaking. And I realized I needed to start practicing on 3D targets for exits. And then it became like second nature when I pulled up on an animal, and it still is today. When I see a target or I see an animal, I'm aiming for where I want the arrow to exit the animal. And it's so subconscious at this point that when I shoot, someone will say, well, where did the arrow go in at? And I'm like, I don't know. I aimed for where I wanted it to come out at.
Right.
I don't really know. And then I got on the animal, and it's like, whoa, I shot him just in front of the hip. Right. And it exited exactly where I wanted. Or I shot him, quartering at different angles, up or down, or just quartering, and once I started doing that, I started having a lot more success. But I like to carry that over into the 3D courses because I just think it prepares you mentally. Because if you, even on this course, I think, man, so much of it, you go into autopilot, especially in archery. I think you shouldn't. You should shoot. Every shot should be a conscious shot.
Right.
But so many guys go into auto subconscious. Pull up, go through there. It's like shooting a basketball.
Right.
They just kind of feel the flow. That's not going to do it with archery. Sometimes, but generally no. And when you're aiming, I feel like if you aim at those 10 rings all the time or just the crease, I mean, that's a big deal. Guys go up right in the crease.
Right. Follow the leg up. Yep.
Yeah. And it's like there's a lot of animal going on there. A lot of guts and lungs and hearts. And, man, if you can.
Well, and then take that to the whitetail world where now you have to anticipate the drop. Right? And so now what is the yardage? Hey, if I'm under 30 yards, I aim differently than if I'm 42 yards, even though it's still a broadside animal.
What's so wild about that is I filmed at 220 frames per second in Texas, shooting a bunch of whitetails. And you're right, at 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, the drop, and when they come back up, come back down, and where to put it, I had to anticipate, especially with the does. The does were like lightning fast.
Correct.
And in slow motion, you can see them just drop. Their chest is almost on the ground, and that little dip where it would have been perfectly centered, it goes right over their back. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. I need to aim in a different spot. And I hate aiming where they're supposed to drop.
Right.
But it's true. They do. That's why we joke around how mule deer are better, because they just stand there and take it like a man.
Well, they're a little underdeveloped. I mean,
it's funny because mule deer definitely have that curiosity gene where they see you. They'll even watch their back trail. They'll come back and check you out. A big, huge buck. Like whitetails, man, a big mature bite. They see you. They don't have the curiosity to confirm jack crap. They're gone.
They're gone.
Mule deer, I've never had one duck an arrow or even flinch. They just sit there. Elk, I've had duck arrows, and whitetails are ridiculous.
Yeah.
Especially whitetails in Alabama. Those things are on crack.
Well, exactly. I will tell you that mule deer can duck an arrow because I have video footage of a 218.
No way.
Ducking my arrow. And I mean, I was so mad that, I heavily put my bow on the ground afterwards. But then when I looked at the footage, I'm like, I did what I did correctly because, of course, we have the luxury of high-speed videography. But it was public land. It had been shot at 12 times and what have you. But it goes to reading the animal, reading the environment, reading the distance, and every animal's different.
Yeah.
So mule deer different than
definitely
than antelope, and public land's different than private.
I'm exaggerating when I say that mule deer don't flinch. Some of those big timber bucks that I've been after on some of these hunts I've been on, they're looking up. They're a lot more wary than some of these sage bucks that I've hunted, where they're just like giant, but just they don't even look around. Different behavior, different environments they grow up in.
So have you been to Hawaii for axis deer?
I haven't yet, but I need to. That's one of those
I
need to do.
Another level.
I think it's
of spooky animals.
Yeah, I think they're probably a lot like Coos Deer in that regard. Like Coos Deer are just, if you get inside 100 yards on a Coos Deer, it's almost like they just sense you're there. It's irritating. And inside 50, I mean, it's just a matter of time before there's some magnetic field detection happens.
You're in their bubble.
Yeah, there's just something about them that are, I can't get away with jack. The other thing I've noticed with Coos Deer, because we were talking about Coos Deer before, I've stopped. I'm not hunting them anymore like I would a deer in general. I hunt them like a human because I think they have eyes more like a person, because I'll sit in front of a bush, big backdrop, bow ready, waiting. Elk will look right past me, right past me. Muleys look right at me in Arizona. I've had them look right at me. 10 of them don't even see me.
Mm-hmm.
Whitetail, 50 yards away. There you are, gone. Yeah. What is it about the Coos Deer that's so different? It's like they see light or color or something where they see me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, so I've learned now, it's like, no, I have to be behind the tree, behind the hill, I need to draw when they're not looking, creep up and shoot. I don't get to just be still like I do with some species. Mm-hmm. They're not like that. I imagine it's probably true with any whitetail out east, you know.
But that's the beauty of bow hunting, right? Every environment, every animal's different. And we talked about this earlier. We hunt for the experience.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously there's a challenge that goes with that experience, but the experience meaning we deploy what we know, mm-hmm. right? Based off a set of experiences and knowledge that we have, but also we're gaining experience at the same time, because every time you stalk an animal, you learn something.
How did you overcome, most of us all went through that period where buck fever hit mm-hmm. us, you know, and you black out, you miss, something just doesn't go right. Did you ever go through that?
Oh, yeah. I would, we all go through target panic and things like that. I would say Forrest Carter really helped develop the fundamentals. Okay. And of course, he's the founder son and runs Forrest or Carter Releases. And we would spend hours talking about, starting off blank bailing, getting used to hitting your anchor point, and don't worry about where the arrow goes, right? Yeah. And then move, slowly, then you open your eye. And he said, do that for 2 weeks. I said, you want me to shoot my eyes closed for 2 weeks? I'm like, well, what do I do after that? He goes, call me in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm like, you have to give me the answer to the story. He said, no, because if I give you the answer to the story, you're going to go to the front of the line.
Yeah, yeah.
And he spent, literally months in one summer getting me to the point where you develop the muscle memory and the mechanics. And so now
I did the same thing. I was reading Randy Ulmer in a magazine, and he talked about doing the same thing and the whole article about it. So then I spent a month in my basement with my eyes closed, just shooting a bail, blind, and go ahead, tell me.
Well, and then you learn that you start at 10 yards, right? And then you start shooting. So now you build a confidence at 10 yards, and then you go to 12 to 15 to 20. And it's amazing how those fundamentals get reinforced over hundreds of arrows.
So what do you think, what was the theory behind that? Because my experience was when I shot with my eyes closed, you're right. You can feel how you're doing the same, whether you're repeating the same thing over and over again, like how you're holding your release. Is it angled, twisted? Yeah. Are you anchoring the same exact spot? But I don't know if it was because my eyes were closed or, I was just blind, or was it more because I just took the aiming out of it?
I think that's really what it is you're purging the bad habits, right? By taking a result out of it. When you shoot with your eyes closed, you have no expectation other than, I hopefully hit the target. Right.
It's just a wall. There's no dot on it either. Right. It's like there's no play. I'm not aiming at all. I did that with my daughter when she got her first bow. Poor girl. But she just sat there and shot for a month at a wall that was 2 feet away, 3 feet away, over and over again, and just developed. She closed her eyes. Yeah. I didn't care. There was no introduction to aiming at all for a while.
And women do learn better than men.
They're better shots.
They are.
See, my wife Suzanne, she never picked up a bow, and then we went to Joel Turner's house, and we sat there, and he taught her how to shoot a conscious shot, and just that surprise shot breaking and stuff. And it's funny, she learned that, and then she just does it every time. Right. She's been doing it so long. There isn't any punching from her. There's no anxiety really either. She pulls up and it's just kind of drifting, and she just goes through the process and it hits. And she's never really done anything else, and so she knows it's always going to be close because when she follows the process, it is. But I don't know how. Like there's a lot of guys don't do that. They force it on there and then they punch it.
Right. And then their feedback loop mentally is, good or bad, and then how do I correct? And that's where bad habits form, because sometimes you can cheat bad habits, right? Punching the trigger at the right time, and then at 20 yards, you're kind of getting away with it. You're like, oh yeah, I'm keeping them all in the bullseye. Well, then all of a sudden you go to 40 yards, and those bad habits reveal themselves. And shoot, I spend a lot of time shooting at between 60 and 100 yards, and it's not necessarily because I'm gonna shoot those distances, which may on my antelope hunt coming up, but for whitetails, I'm a 40, 50 yard guy and in.
Yeah.
But boy, do you find out the mistakes that you make at long yardages.
We were talking about that too. I just got the new bow. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, I'm stepping back, sighting in, and I'm just like tight groups, fist-sized groups. All my arrows, 10 arrows stacking. I'm like, this is great. Step back to 60. All of a sudden, it's like they just spread out. And I was kind of bummed. I was kind of like, man, how can they be so good in 10 yards difference? They're popping out. What am I doing that's a little less consistent? And then I, kind of working through it. And part of it, I think, was just wasn't putting enough time into executing that exact perfect shot. It was okay and forgiving enough at 50 and 40 and 30.
Right.
But when I started going back to 60, 70 and 80, man, that peep alignment has to be more perfect. The hold has to be more steady. Everything has to be just a little bit better. And you don't know that until you try those longer shots.
But once you develop the confidence, then for at least me personally, when I'm hunting, I focus completely on the animal.
Yeah.
Because I've done it so many thousands of times. And again, I don't profess to be a Levi Morgan or a Lee Lukoski or a Randy Ulmer, but I'm a competent killer.
Yeah.
And now I can watch the animal. I'm watching how they move. I'm watching the gaps, because I go into the season fully confident.
Yep.
That my skills are there, and that muscle memory will take over. Like when I anchor, it feels right.
When you're on the ground, you're not in a blind. You're just spot and stock, and you're right. Like, I don't worry about my shooting really. There's just watching the animal, see how he behaves. When to draw your bow is like an art.
No question.
And I'm getting better, but there's no way to figure that out without being in the bubble on live animals you're trying to kill. That's why the Axis thing really is appealing. Brian Barney's like, go up there, shoot a couple, get experience. You're going on mini stalks a day on one of the most jumpy critters ever. There's something about being in the bubble that's so important.
And you are right about the repetition, whether it's whitetails just learning how to aim and execute a shot, because typically you're not spot and stalking them, at least not with a bow. But the Axis deer, that is a whole nother level as a bow hunter. To be able to get there, anticipate the shot, because they're also a herd animal.
Yeah. You're sneaking up on more than one.
You're sneaking up, and they react so quickly to the string. It's really incredible. The one other thing, point you had made earlier, we were walking around that kind of stuck in my head, is you made the comment. A lot of people have this feeling, well, I'm competent to 60 yards, or I'm competent to 80, or whatever their window of expertise is. So when they hit the edge of that window stalking, then they take advantage of, now I can shoot. Right. So let's say that window's 80 yards, that window's 60 yards. As soon as they hit 60, and your comment you made, which was brilliant, is if I can just get 5 yards closer, that reduces, it eliminates more factors and variables and makes me more precise. And then 5 yards becomes 5 more yards. Think of them in little increments, and you may hit a point where, based off the situation, you can't get. But there's a big difference between 50 and 45.
Yeah, huge. And I think you take it for granted because when you're at home shooting on your home target, you're at you just go to the local 3D range and you do the course. You're like, man, I smoked everything. Mm-hmm. Like I got this. But there's a big difference between that and a live animal. Mm-hmm. The big difference between the adrenaline load and the excitement and just the fatigue from hunting day after day on top of it. You're not fresh. It's different. And what I started to realize was the cone of variables. I heard this from a friend once. The cone of variables becomes exponentially wider the further and further you are away from the target in terms of what can go wrong with your shot.
Right.
And when I started thinking that a lot of times what cost me my opportunity was shooting too soon. And the reason we shoot too soon often is because we're afraid that's our only chance and we're going to lose the opportunity, generally. Right. At least that's what goes through my mind. Mm-hmm. And so when I started to say, that's okay. It's okay if I lose the opportunity. It's okay to gamble to get 100%, like I know I can make this shot, than it is to gamble on this 60% odds shot. Why gamble at all if you don't have to?
Right.
And so I started making myself, before I go on a hunt, and I get myself as dialed as I can, like I've been shooting a lot. I've been trying to get ready. Before I leave, I go out there and I step back. If I can put all 10 of my arrows in the kill zone on the animal, whatever yardage that is, where all 10 are in there, that's the yardage. That's the closest, the furthest I want to ever shoot it all. Mm-hmm. So at 70, I might put all 10 in the kill zone. At 80, I might put 7 in there, but 2 flyers, 3 flyers, or I might put 8 and 2 flyers. It's like, then that doesn't count.
Right.
If I can't do 10 out of 10 at home without the nerves and all the other things going on.
There's no, because that 10 automatically becomes 5, 6, 7.
Totally.
When you add other variables. So last year, and I documented some of this on social media, is preparing for the season. I said I'm going to shoot 100 days straight. Not going to. So even if I travel, I'm taking my bow, right? And what I learned by doing that, and this is going to sound really obvious, right? So you'd be like, well, all of us Westies do this. I can't believe you East Coast guys are slow learners, or whitetail guys are slow learners. If it was pouring rain out, I shot. If it was 20-mile wind out, I shot. It was bright sunlight, right? Which definitely changes how you see your pin and see your peep.
Yep.
I shot. And I started looking at all the environmental. Now remember, so my bow was the same. It was still warm. So I was still in a t-shirt and shorts, right? I'm still in my backyard. But I looked at the group sizes that changed just environmentally based off of lighting, wind, rain. And it made me appreciate, it's raining outside. I guess I'm not shooting tonight. Wrong answer.
Yeah.
That's when you need to be shooting.
Right. That's I agree with that like 100%, because when you start to know your limits in that moment, when you start to know, okay, because I say I only take shots I know I can make. Now, nobody can know 100%, but what I mean is when it's raining, maybe my effective range is on a live animal, like all of them in there at 75 yards. I'm like, I've proven I can do that. That's 10 out of 10, 75 yards. If it's still, if there's no wind, if everything is working, if my adrenaline is to a minimum, if I feel really confident, if I'm fresh, like all these variables go into it, right? If it's windy and it's raining and there's a lot of other variables involved, it's like, okay, my effective range today, I know I can make a 35-yard shot. Mm-hmm. That's I know I can do that. 40, 50, there's no way. There's just no way. Like understanding that about yourself and where that limit is, instead of stupidly blowing the opportunity by being at 47 yards and being like, okay, that's my range, I'm going to force it. I would lose opportunities when 2 hours later I have a 27-yard shot,
Right.
and I kill it.
Right.
So I'm like, no more of this. Like, it's something I'm trying to explain it, but now it's like I'm shooting because I know right now because I'm going to kill you.
Right.
I don't gamble on the shot anymore like I used to. I used to gamble like I'm going to let it go at 48, and I hope this one's good. It's like, but why did I need to gamble then? Why not gamble on the higher odds move, in my opinion, which is move closer? Okay, you blew it. You gamble. Either way, it's a gamble. I just think the waiting longer, getting closer gamble usually ends with much higher results than the shot gamble. Does that make sense?
So here's what was going through my head when you're saying this, right? Putting it kind of in my terms, as you're approaching that shoot or decision making time, is it a sure shot? Is this 100%er?
Yeah.
Right. And if you go no, go closer.
Yep.
Right.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Right.
You said it better. Is it a sure shot?
Is it a sure shot? Because is I will tell you, if people have not shot in the rain, like one of my favorite strategies to kill elk is I love to hunt them in the rain. You get a big bull in the rut, screaming.
Open country muleys, wind. Give me a heavy wind. Correct. They hunker down. I can get to 15 yards.
Right. But then understanding.
Open field.
Right. So use the environment as a positive, but then know your limitations. Because I know in a driving rain, there's no way that I can shoot past 40 yards, and I'm talking from the bow standpoint.
Yep.
And the reason is there's so much water on the string, on the cables, on the limbs.
Yeah.
You cannot, I don't care who you are out here. And Randy Ulmer tell you this, if he was sitting here with us, you don't know how much that's slowing your bow down.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah.
But whatever it does at 30 yards or 35 is probably immaterial on an elk.
Yeah. Well, I feel the same way about wind because we don't get too much rain. I don't have to hunt too much rain in some of these arid states I'm hunting in, but I do have to deal with wind. You get up on these 10,000 feet elevation and the wind's ripping on a ridge top and I got a buck bed at the bottom of a cliff or something like that. Well, I want to kill in the wind. I want to hunt in the wind because their senses, they don't pick up the scent as much. The wind's blowing too hard and it's directional.
Don't hear very well.
They can't hear, right? So now's my chance to close to 20 yards, 25 yards. The question is, in a 40 mile an hour, 50 mile an hour wind, crosswind, can I make a 20-yard shot?
Right.
And I learned that in Alberta because the winds would kick up a lot in that open country, in the Badlands. And I'd be on a deer that I could smoke at 50 yards, 40 yards if everything was chill. But the wind is ripping. But I was able to stalk to that animal within 20 yards or so. 25. Now it's like, okay, let's make this. And I'm doing this. The high winds just ripping me to the side. And it's like, I'm waiting for some gust to like just a lull. And then it's a hold and punch. Right. Because there's just no way I'm going to do a surprise.
But think of all the other things that you figured out along the way, like where you keep your quiver now. Right. If you I take my quiver off when I in high wind because all that is a sail to push my bow. Right. I changed my stalk angle for the wind. I never ever want to be 90 degrees.
That's what I started doing too. I shot a buck. One of my best bucks I've ever taken with a bow was in Alberta, and it was like a 60. It was some ridiculous headwind because I went straight at it instead of at an angle, and it was ripping hard. But I belly crawled right up to this thing, and it was like 38 yards. That wind was hitting me hard, right in the face. But I was able to actually hold that much more steady than a crosswind.
Absolutely.
And I was like, oh, this is doable. It took me a while. And then what I didn't account for was how much that would push my arrow down.
Right. Because of the resistance against the flexion and the broadhead.
So the arrow went a little low. I still got the buck, but the coyotes got him a little bit first. Yeah. So I ended up with not much meat, and that was hard. That was hard to take. Right. You never want to do that. We waited. I couldn't get him till the next day, and then he was gone. Mostly right. Those coyotes in Alberta, they don't mess around.
They don't. No, they're.
It was a lesson learned though, because all I had to do was put that thing a little bit high in that headwind, and at 38 yards, I smoked him. I mean, I was only a couple inches low, and I felt like I made a great shot, you know, but then I started messing around with the headwind like I should have done at home, you know, or in another controlled situation. Then I would have known, hey, because I would always correct for a crosswind.
Right.
Because I felt it. I knew it. It would drift my arrow so many inches to the left or the right in the crosswind. But a headwind just faced it.
Right. Well, and knowing how to shoot just wind in general, whether you're a gun hunter, muzzleloader hunter, or an archer, understanding the factor of wind speed, wind direction. Is it full value? Is it quarter value? Right.
Yeah.
What is the speed? You know, do I have thermals? You know, that I'm, you know, that I'm dealing with, right? Because a lot of times on these Western hunts, you're shooting across a canyon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there could be a crosswind or thermals.
I've seen people's arrows go whoop into the air.
Right,
like,
and they go, right. What?
Shooting mountain goats, you know, I'm like, and there's some just face wind coming up that we can't see. And that arrow goes, whoop. Yeah. Wild. On film, you can watch it and you're like, oh, that thing is dropping. And then it just didn't.
Right.
It's weird, you know.
But that's why we love bow hunting, because they're all different.
What, you know, you said a minute ago, you shot your bow for 100 days?
100 days straight.
100 days straight, no matter what.
No matter what.
So one thing I've noticed is shooting in the wind can develop some really bad habits for guys. Really bad habits. Because they no longer, they're holding and punching, like forcing these shots, which then gets them really jittery, and then they never know. It's like someone sitting there tapping you on the shoulder every time you're trying to shoot, and you never know. And so you start developing bad habits because of that anxiety. What's your take on that?
Well, it does, right? Or it can. And that's where the training comes in. Certainly the style of the release you shoot, right, matters. And I'm going to tell you why. So when I train in those environments, I go to a resistance release to learn before I go to my hunting release. Okay, so Carter makes one. I'm sure other companies do. So the only way this release goes off is back tension. Yeah. I have to pull it apart. So you put your thumb on the brake or the safety, you pull it back, and it's geometrically shaped identical to my thumb release, by the way. So the only way, and then Greg Poole from AAE Archery said, it doesn't matter where your arrow hits. It matters if it hits behind the pin.
Yeah, you said that today, and I thought that's brilliant.
Right. So if you get comfortable with the wiggle and what have you, trust yourself. But by learning that release, so I could never punch. You can't punch that release. Yeah, it's physically like you have to pull through it.
I say that all the time, even with a hinge. It's kind of similar, especially if you haven't shot that hinge too much. Yeah, it has the same feel because I can't punch it really. Like I'm not sure when it's going to go off, and like the Randy Ulmer thing, I had 3 of them set at different tensions. So then it's just I'm kind of forced to just aim.
You just have to accept it.
Yeah,
and I think by going through that ahead of time, then all of a sudden being in an environment that I've never experienced it, and then add the stress factor of the animal and the stress factor of being 10 days into a hunt and the stress factor of having spent $10,000 on a hunt and being away from the family. And I mean, all those things matter. So you have in life controllables and uncontrollables.